Something fun I like to do from time to time is create my own custom cards. Usually they're not true custom cards where I come up with the idea 100%, but usually it's taking either cards that I think have a chance of being released in the future or have already been announced and guessing what they can do and seeing how close I actually get to the official ability when it gets released can be really neat. So with Incandescent Lion, Blonde Ezel, as well as Draconic Kaiser Vermilion coming out in DBT 11 in a few weeks, I figured that Platina Ezel, the Blood, and heck, we already have Maelstrom from Minerva's Rising, so Glory Maelstrom aren't too far away. They gave us Dragonic Overlord the end, as well as Phantom Blaster Overlord, so I think we'll get these upgraded versions. So I thought it'd be fun to discuss what I've come up with for Blazing Lion Platina Ezel's ability, as well as 2 support cards for it. So just getting into the cards, Blazing Lion Platina Ezel would be a grade 3 with Twin Drive and Persona Ride. It would be a normal unit with 13k power, 1 critical at a base, belonging to the Keter Sanctuary Nation, Gold Paladin Clan, and would be a human race. This, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. But getting into the effects here, it would have 3 effects. The first one being Continuous Vanguard Circle, you could only ride cards with Ezel in their card name. The second effect would be Continuous Vanguard Circle. During your turn, if your soul has an Incandescent Lion, Blonde Ezel, all your rear guards get power plus 5,000. And the third effect would be Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, cost Counterblast 1, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 grade 3 or less unit cards from among them, call them to open rearguard circles, and shuffle your deck. So my goals when designing this card were, first off, to be somewhat faithful to the original version, as most of the encounter cards have been, at least the Vanguard encounter cards have been very faithful to their original counterparts, just emulating what did they do, how did it feel to play them. So I wanted to keep that true with this card, but also while keeping some of the stuff that Ezel has going for it that are unique to D-Series kind of embedded in this card as well, just to make it a coherent strategy. And finally, I wanted to make this card feel like a true upgrade, an evolution to Blonde Ezel, and hence why this card is highly dependent on riding on top of, or really having Blonde Ezel in your soul. And ideally what you're really doing here is going Incandescent Lion, Blonde Ezel with the Bowman, and then riding Blazing Lion, Platina Ezel on your, well, it'd be your second grade 3 turn, but really it would be standard first grade 3 turn for most decks. So keeping true to Blonde Ezel is that second skill that you need Incandescent Lion, Blonde Ezel in your soul to give your rear guards power plus 5,000. The original Platina Ezel gave a 5k power buff to all of its Gold Paladin rear guards, but also, notably, if it had Incandescent Lion, Blonde Ezel in soul, got an additional power plus 2k permanently, known as Cross Ride. So I wanted to kind of combine those 2 abilities together, and thus we got this one just to give a nice board power up. The final effect, the one to generate 2 new cards onto open rearguard circles, so possibly getting you a 4th and a 5th attack. That one came from the Blonde Ezel from D-Series, and I really like that one as a big power play, and I didn't want to lose it when going into Platina Ezel, so I carried it over, just got rid of the 10k to Vanguard, because in this case, Platina Ezel's whole goal is to support the rear guards by giving them power, not necessarily give power to itself. So I think it's very in theme and really still feels like Platina Ezel at the end of the day. I still wanted to keep that restriction that as non-Ezels can not ride this card, so restricting it purely to Ezels. I think this card is less likely to be broken if you can ride into something other than an Ezel, but in the spirit of making sure that it doesn't become a problem in the future, I decided it's just best to keep that restriction. So my idea for this card is you just doing your normal Blonde Ezel stuff, and then once you get to the following grade 3 turn, you just get to ride into this card and just do more. Blonde Ezel at that point would, unless your opponent's already at grade 3, normally it's just a Soul Blast 1 to generate an extra unit, but this card instead, on top of getting to that, also gives them power. Of course, if your Vanguard's not at grade 3, you're still not calling those cards, which I think is an appropriate balance point. You should not be able to start hurtling 5 attacks at your opponent as soon as they get to grade 3. I think that's a bit too strong, but instead you can get more power on those 3 attacks, just push more damage to make those multi-attack more deadly as your opponent gets to their grade 3 turn. I think the other good balance point to note with this card is that you aren't getting Persona Ride as early as Blonde Ezel. What it does is it just kind of increments the power, in my opinion, a little bit each turn, but also doesn't let it just kind of take off. So you kind of are effectively getting Persona Ride power, 5k less if you have a booster behind Vanguard, since the Vanguard doesn't give the power from its own effect, it's just the rear guards, but it just means in subsequent turns as you do start Persona Riding, your numbers are just scaling that much bigger and your multi-attacks just becoming that much stronger. Of course, without testing, I have no clue if this would be too good or not, but from pure 3, I think it would be fine. As for the supporting cards, I'd really love to see Player of the Holy Bow Viviane back. Do I think this is going to be the one they go with? I could see it, Bagdemagus is also a big possibility, but I really want to see Viviane, so that's one I went with. So Viviane would be a grade 2 with Intercept, 5,000 shield, a normal unit with 10,000 power, base critical of 1, belonging to the Keter Sanctuary Nation, Gold Paladin clan, and would be an elf race. Again, these stuff should be pretty self-explanatory. But as for the effect, I decided to go with Auto Rearguard Circle. At the end of battle, this unit attacked a grade 3 or greater Vanguard. If you have a Vanguard with Ezel in its card name, you may perform one of the following. If this unit's attack hit, cost counterblast 1, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 grade 3 or less unit card from among them, call to an open rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. If the attack did not hit, you get to choose one of your Vanguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So Viviane, its original form was on hit, counterblast 1, look at the top card of your deck. If it's a gold pound, you call it to an open rearguard circle. So that could create additional attacks. And I really wanted to have this as well for Gold Paladin, just a possibility to hit a 6th attack, but it still requires some setup here. If you note, Viviane does not put itself to the bottom of the deck, and I did that on purpose. I think that'd be too good if it could generate another attack while still putting itself to the bottom of the deck. And especially since the card that it can call might not necessarily be able to put it to the bottom of the deck, you really do need to put in some extra work to be able to do so. But since I intend this to be a high rarity support card, just having it be on hit so my opponent has complete agency on whether or not this goes off or not, I kind of like that it would still have some return even if it didn't. And just giving a Vanguard 5k power I thought was in theme. The rearguard support the Vanguard while the Vanguard supports the rearguards. Simple as that. So that's how I ended up coming up with this effect. I kind of like the duality of it, having an on hit when it does not hit. But also, I think there's a lot of skill packed into this card here, because I kind of mentioned some of it with it not putting itself to the bottom of the deck, but also when it does hit, since you have to call it to an open rearguard circle, what you call doesn't necessarily put itself to the bottom of the deck, so it can clog up and mess up your Vanguard from being able to create more multi-attacks. So you really do need to be careful about what cards you include in your deck and how you build your board. And of course, I decided to keep the attack extension locked behind the grade 3 Vanguard, because of course with Blazing Lion, Platina Ezel, it giving power to the board and then something else being able to generate more attacks kind of defeat the purpose of why I put some restrictions on Platina Ezel and why some of the restrictions exist on Blonde Ezel. So I thought it was still appropriate here. And I said specifically the Vanguard, again, just to kind of keep it more restricted, because this deck definitely can pop off, have a pretty high ceiling with this card. So I wanted to make sure it didn't get into a preposterous level or problematic level just on pure 3 alone. Now the final support card I have is Player of the Holy Axe Nimue. I think this card is less likely to see an encounter version, but I thought it's thematic to pair it with the Viviane. So it'd be a grade 1 with boost, 5,000 shield, a normal unit with 8k power, base critical of 1, belonging to the Keter Sanctuary Nation, the Gold Paladin clan, and have a human race. Its 2 effects would be auto when placed on rearguard circle. If you have a Vanguard with Ezel in its card name, cost counterblast 1, choose a Reign Supreme King of Beasts in your drop zone and put it into your hand. Second effect would be auto rearguard circle. At the end of battle, this unit boosted. If you have a Vanguard with only Gold Paladin for its clan, cost put 2 rearguards in the same column as this unit on the bottom of your deck in any order. Choose up to 2 of your units and they get power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So the idea behind this card was I want to give this deck extra utility, and since one thing that going Platina Ezel causes you to lose out on is that extra call from Blonde Ezel each turn. So I like the idea that we can more easily loop back the order to be able to play it again, to be able to call out more rear guards, kind of thin your deck a bit more. But also I like that now this deck has a chance to possibly cut down on these Reign Supreme King of Beast orders, run less of them because you can loop them back a bit more consistently with Nimue. It does cost a counterblast, but that's the cost of being able to get the more flexibility in your deck, and of course the utility that Reign Supreme King of Beast has. The reason I say you can cut it down is because the grade 1 searches out. So theoretically, you could just run the 1 or 2 copies and then just keep looping them with Nimue's. As for the second skill, I kind of want something that could pair quite nicely with Viviane while also giving more support to bot deck stuff that can't normally be bot decked. I think that having cards like these will just help Ezel be better supported by generic support cards in the future for much longer if we have these. So just being able to bot deck both itself, because it effectively would be itself, and the unit it boosted, just clears up more circles. And the idea that why I did it that way is with the Viviane here, sometimes there might be scenarios where you just can't bot deck the unit you called it, but now you open up 2 with the Nimue, so you can just create a column with Ezel, with either one of the Ezels. So you don't necessarily have to generate 2 additional attacks with it, you can just create a bigger column for it. So I like that flexibility with this card as well. And just as for the upside, just bot decking 2 to give 2 of your units power plus 5k, I don't think is necessarily worth the payoff. It's very low output for going -2 on board, but I still think it's very thematic, just being able to support its the other units on board can be Vanguard or Rearguard. Since it's Rearguard, I thought that would also be appropriate. but it's more the synergies with this deck is why you would run it. Just being able to clear up 2 rear guard circles and also dodge removal. Like, we can't, even though this output is very low for the cost, I think that it's one of those effects that on paper would be worse than in practice. Because, I mean, against a lot of decks, just being able to clear up 2 circles seems really, really strong. So just a supporter card that I think would just kind of fit in quite nicely, a nice kind of cherry on top way to round out the deck was kind of what I was thinking with this one. Doesn't really have bearing on its original one, so this is one I just heavily deviated from the original Nimue, but I thought it was appropriate because, again, the goal for this card was just to have it be extra utility for the deck, not necessarily be true to itself like Viviane and Blonde Ezel was. Doing Platina Ezel, not Blonde Ezel. But this is what I've come up with for Platina Ezel as well as 2 support cards. I'm really curious to see if we will get Platina Ezel. I really think we will, and what it will end up doing. But since this was a discussion on theory crafting, I want to hear from you all. What do you think about the cards I've come up with? Do you think I'm off the mark on any of these effects on balance or what it could possibly be? What are your own thoughts for what Platina Ezel could do and what support cards we may see and what they might do? I'd love to hear it all down in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this different kind of video from me, please consider leaving a like down below, as well as subscribing and turn on the notification bell if you haven't done so already, so you're notified when I do upload more content, because I'd love to do this more in the future as I've got more cards. Currently, I'm working on a theory crafted version of the Blood, as well as some supporter cards. Still kind of working through that one. That one's been a bit tougher for me. So once I'm done with that, if I don't have any other content that I think is more pressing, hey, I might make a video on it. So we'll just have to wait and see. But with that being said though, look forward to more content coming out real soon.